Hey everybody, it's Farand Wasiak with the IACIS podcast. I'm here with Steve Whalen, co-founder of Sumuri. Steve, how are you doing this Friday, summer Friday, last of July?
Doing good. Just trying to stay out of the heat as everybody else is.
Yeah, everybody, well, I don't think anybody's escaping it this summer. Steve, former retired Delaware State Police. Tell us about your career in Delaware, and then leading up to being co-founder of Sumuri.
Oh yeah, that's kind of a strange story because I never prepared for this, never expected it. But born in Delaware, went to University of Delaware, went to school for physics originally. Ended up graduating with 2 degrees in psychology and sociology. Didn't even think about getting into law enforcement. Needed a job. Got into law enforcement. Got hired, regular patrol officer for 5 years. Did pretty well. They asked me to get into CI, criminal investigations. They saw me use a calculator. Therefore, they asked me to do electronic crimes, which no one was doing at the time. We had just, a couple of cases here and there, but there was nobody formalized to do it. Once I was successful in doing a couple of those, they kept asking me to do more. I asked to go to training. I begged and begged and begged. About 2 years later, I got into IACIS actually, which is where I started my career with you guys, which was back in 1999. So once I got my CFCE, which was a little bit different back then, I wouldn't say harder. We basically, they signed me full time for the first time to do, I guess, computer crimes, like the first trooper to sign it in Delaware to do computer crimes. And then a couple years later after that, we made an official unit, and it started growing from there. And then about 2007, I retired from law enforcement to go off. I joined another company with some other guys. We formed another company. Didn't jive with the way I like to do business, which is kind of weird. I mean, I know everybody's in business to make money, but I just want to help, just do what I did with law enforcement. So my wife and I kind of split off and created Sumuri because her heart's in the right place and the same place where mine was. And she was supporting me behind the scenes for all those years anyway. I learned a lot, and we just went off and started Sumuri.
Wow, that's nice. That's um, a great risk, great reward. But you guys, I know you guys, myself being in industry in digital forensics for 18 years, I know you guys are a very well established company. You mentioned IACIS. I know you guys. You are a lifetime member, right? You
Yes.
got that last year, no, 2 years ago, maybe
2 years ago.
2 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, yes, excellent. And I know you guys. Sumuri has for the 2 week event in Orlando. You guys have classes. Not only are you a sponsor with a booth, but you also conduct classes both weeks. Correct?
Yeah. So I kind of wear all kinds of different hats at IACIS. So, one, I grew up in IACIS. I've been staff forever. I'd love to help. I don't think I've ever missed any conference except for one, which was a kind of interesting year. But no, so at the conferences, we do as an exhibitor. Obviously, we sponsor it as an exhibitor as a company. We do both the Mac classes. So it's our Mac classes there. We, offer them at IACIS, so that everybody can take them. They're all vendor neutral. So we like to teach from a vendor neutral perspective, not push tools. And then from there, I also do the BCFE Mac module as well.
Okay.
Usually I'm
Okay.
the last one that people see before they just talk about your CFCE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they're finally all burnt out and
When they're burnt out, I'm like, hey, everything you learned the last 2 weeks, just forget about it. This is totally different.
yeah, and all they know is that they're getting out at 2 o'clock and they can finally go to the pool and
Yeah,
enjoy
exactly.
that second Friday. I understand. I know we enjoy having you guys at the event. You guys have those great stickers that everybody puts on their laptops now, including. I mean, I know I outfitted my whole office with your stickers that you had, those sheets of stickers you had. Uh, the reason we wanted to have you on is all things Mac, and I know you guys you specialize in that. I think you've been using Macs from what I know about you since it was those little Macintosh. I don't even know what they were called
Yeah,
back in the
classic.
day.
It's an old Mac Plus. Yeah, it's still in the middle of my house. It's like one of our centerpieces. It still works. But yeah, I got a Mac in 1989. I actually asked for an Amiga because they could play games on that. But then they're like, no, you're in college. You need to do work. So
Yeah.
I ended up getting
Uh,
a Mac Plus, and then that was the beginning of that.
Yeah, I know you. I know you're one of the leaders at Mac forensics. Very interesting to me. I've taken a few Mac forensics classes over the years. But some of the classes are always in a perfect world environment once you have that image of the Mac, once you have and you're going from there. But a lot of the battle is getting the actual image, especially nowadays. It's changed, and I know you have a little presentation prepared. We could just hopefully for our viewers and our listeners help us all out in
sure.
the modern world of Mac forensics.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about each slide if you want to. Do you want me to go ahead and share it now?
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So just really quick, and feel free to jump in and ask when you have questions. But the way I kind of explain things in a quick presentation to everyone about Mac forensics, and it's things have changed like from quite a long time ago. So back when we were talking about that Mac Plus I had, if you use Windows to do an analysis or Linux to do analysis of Mac, no real big deal. I mean, there were some things that are way different about Macs as opposed to anything else, but really not something so much that would be a problem. So, and the other thing that's happened is that with modern file systems and modern technologies and everything that's happening now within the Mac environment and other operating systems and file systems, things are different than what I was taught when I first went through IACIS, in 1999, and all the other training that I had since then. So I've had thousands of hours of training. I delivered, tens of thousands of hours of training. The thing is that we're used to, like, for example, trying to get a physical image, trying to preserve that crime scene, right? Like it was a traditional crime scene where we put the yellow crime tape up, but we don't want to contaminate it. So we were kind of taught to kind of pull the plug, back in the old days, and that would kind of lock it down. And even back then it was wrong. And I think that's funny because nobody really considered talking about volatile data or encryption. So we were just like, just pull the plug, you'll be fine. Oh, by the way, here's a cert that you guys can have. And so we were kind of, so we didn't think about that kind of stuff. But nowadays, those kind of things are just natively built into the operating systems. And because of that, the traditional forensics that we're used to, where we pull the plug and try to make a physical image and don't step on the crime scene, basically, or the digital crime scene, that's almost impossible nowadays. Because what happens is, we're used to that dead box analysis, where we try to make a bit for bit copy, or a forensic copy, and we just analyze that file system for artifacts. So nowadays with Macs, again, and other file systems are following the same path, and you'll see it soon. So pretty soon you'll be doing podcasts with other people on the Windows side going, oh my gosh, what just changed? So everything will be changing soon.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where I kind of show the slide from like a matrix, this little screenshot, but it fits in perfectly well with when I'm talking to people or trying to train them or trying to convince them of what they need to do. And this is a scene from the Matrix where Morpheus is asking Neo, like, hey, I know you've seen some strange stuff. I can show you all of it, but you got to pick, right? Do you want to take the blue pill and the story ends and you wake up in your bed and you believe everything you want to believe, or you take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland and I show you how far the rabbit hole goes? And the last line is really cool too, because it says, remember, all I'm offering you is the truth, nothing more. So when I like to teach, I like to just state facts, right? It's up to you to validate and test. So even when I talk to people, I tell everybody, consider me a liar until you actually tested and validated yourself. And when you've tested and validated yourself, then it's true. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some things here, which are just basically facts. It's up for you to test and validate. I kind of highly encourage everybody to do it, because you need to do that in at least a U.S. court of law anyway to basically qualify as an expert. So here's the problem. Since the early days of Macs, right, and we're talking quite a long time ago, Windows forensics tools or other non-native tools, I want to call them, basically had issues processing Macs. And we've been dealing with it ever since. And we've kind of, like, a lot of the tool developers that make the forensics tools kind of poo-pooed everything and just was like, yeah, we'll do the best we can and we'll just move on. But sometimes the best we can is not good enough, right? If there's evidence that's out there that could either prove guilt or innocence, it's our job to find it. So if you don't find all the evidence and you're okay with that, I'm not okay with that. So that's one of the biggest issues I had quite a long time ago. And I kind of discovered this by accident, because when I was actually helping out another forensics tool company, basically like a pretty popular one back at the time, I offered to help them develop a class on how to do Mac forensics with their tool. What I found out was I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it properly is the best word to say. There was things that were really, like, I guess, horrific to find out at the time. And then just to say, just to be fair, since then, that consultation I did with them turned into, adding new features to their tools. So things got better, but they can't be perfect. So I can tell you an early story too, is that the very first forensics tool, that we're familiar with as far as a GUI-based tool, was actually developed on a Mac, for the reason that Macs understand Macs and they also understand Windows, right? It's
Yes.
kind of like what we do with our tools. Same thing. When I try to redevelop like a forensics tool, I don't want to redevelop what somebody already has. I said to myself, if money wasn't an issue, if that wasn't the driving factor behind us making tools, what tool would I start with? Or platform, and I basically was like, okay, well, Macs understand Macs and they're hard to parse and understand. So obviously Macs can understand a Mac, but can Macs understand Windows? Yes. Can understand Unix, Linux, everything else, Android, iOS? Yes, 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 yes. Can Windows do it? No. So, if you try to plug an HFS or an APFS drive into a Windows machine, the first thing it asks you to do
Oh,
is what?
right. It's not gonna accept it.
Yeah, it's going to say,
Yeah.
would you like me to format this so
Format
use
it.
it?
Yeah, and and that's why I have my own. I have my own. One of my, every time you go to NCFI, you get a hard drive of some sort, and I have my own dedicated, APFS hard drive that I use exclusively just for Macs, and it's just a talk in the Mac environment. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not bashing any other tools out there or any manufacturer. Like, get all the tools you can. We encourage everybody to grab as many tools as you can and use the best features of each, right?
Yeah,
So
but
there's no.
yeah,
Okay.
but then you have, well, I know there's difficulty with it, but then you have like exFAT is sort of like the middle ground of both, isn't it? But I think Macs get a little testy if the file's too big with exFAT. Is that what it is?
No, not really.
I thought there was.
Yeah, so there's some little issues with center around FAT32. So Mac uses what's called VFAT, like Linux it does in
Right.
Unix computers, and it has a file size limitation of 2 gigs, so instead of 4 gigs.
No, but I thought that with the exFAT file system, there was some more compatibility with it, but only it was like more of a limit that.
Yeah, so what happened was Apple being more advanced than everybody else, the next issue that came up with exFAT was Apple was using GUID partition tables where everybody else wasn't.
Okay.
And so like Windows 7 around that time, if you formatted something on the Mac and brought it back into, Windows environment, it wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
So, like, and we had the same issue with Paladin, right? So, Paladin is our tool and we were on top of things. So
Hmm. Yeah.
the partition scheme was different in Linux and Mac. But and then when you brought it back into Windows 7, and it was a newer, a newer partition scheme that wasn't supported by Windows 7. So everybody was still using Windows 7 for their forensics tools. And we had to say, no, 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 no. You format on your Windows computer first before you bring it into, into Paladin or Mac or something.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the issues that I remember, but not really much on the file sizes that I can remember.
Okay. I thought for some reason that was it. I know. Trying to image Macs in the past, I thought for a while you could use an exFAT formatted drive, but then
Yeah.
it just in the last years wasn't going away, and then of course everything's changed in the last 3-4 years with it. So
Yeah, so it kind of a good segue into what you're talking about. Like, so there's another issues with exFAT or anything that's a non-native file system to Apple, and that is the introduction of Apple extended metadata, which came about in Mac OS 10.4. So quite a long time ago, and that was the same time they introduced the Intel chipsets, and that was around 2005, 2006. So when they introduced that, Apple changed everything. That's when I got really scared and I realized, oh, this is bad. This is bad. Like, like Windows tools, the ones that we were used to using, right? The ones I used and everybody else used, they weren't picking up on this stuff.
hmm.
And what is even more concerning is that you're being shown the wrong data or not seeing it at all. And so again, back to what is we have to do as law enforcement or corporate, right? I mean, I've helped with cases where we're talking companies are suing each other for millions and millions of dollars, right? You can't be, you don't want to be wrong. And then even more important than that, right? If you're from the law enforcement side, you're basically presenting evidence in court of law that is going to turn someone's, freedom, if they're going to lose their freedom, or, if it's let's say we're still dealing with states with capital punishment, right?
Oh
We
yeah.
don't want to make mistakes.
No, absolutely.
but because of the limitations of these technologies and tools, that you're not getting all the information, so you don't have all the information to report on. That's when I got really scared. So that's when I kind of like delve into it more, into like what we were missing. And of course, me being a Mac guy, I kind of learned my Windows forensics on a Mac. So that's kind of how I got into it. When I went to these Windows training courses, I only had a Mac. And I'm like, well, how do you do that on a Mac? And they're like, well, there's no evidence on a Mac. Don't worry about it. So that was the answer I got. So I had to figure it out. So I learned how to do both Windows forensics and Mac forensics on a Mac. And that's kind of what I did, because it's, back when things are more expensive and paying for your own stuff, right? So but yeah, so this extended metadata became a huge issue, which I can talk about more and show you some examples.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
But some other things that still haven't even been solved to this day, right, is these non-traditional disks. And this is, like I talked earlier about, we're used to physical disks and logical volumes, and we want to try to get an image of the physical disk. Everybody has in their head right now, you got to get a physical disk image. You got to get a physical disk image. Well, what if you can't?
Correct.
What if you can't anymore? So that's what people like. That's where the red pill, blue pill comes in. You got to understand, you may want that, but it's not practical or not even possible anymore, because Apple's using a combination of synthesized disks and virtual volumes. And it's really, really complicated how they kind of put what we see together as a single drive as a user. It is not really, really simplistic at all. It's very complex and complicated, and using a lot of different proprietary technologies that no tools really fully understand, because APFS and other technologies that Apple produces, although it may came from the Unix world and it was tweaked a little bit by Apple, they never fully released the specifications for it. So nobody has the ability to fully decrypt these or fully, extract all the data or see everything. It's a problem. And a good example of this is back when Apple, do you remember the Fusion drives?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So, Fusion Drive was like this really neat thing that Apple kind of borrowed from someone else. They're really good at that. Where they always take someone else's idea and improve upon it, right?
It's influenced, I guess you could say. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they're making money, but so it was a small SSD for speed, right? So you put the files you want to use, or the operating system files, on the SSD, and then you just use a spinning platter for long-term storage, right? So you combine that together, and the user sees it as a single drive, but really it's two physical disks. And it was kind of mashed together using what's called core storage, which is a type of logical volume management that from the Linux world and the Unix worlds. So the thing is, though, is that what kind of made things confusing is that if you're imaging the two physical disks and you're trying to bring them in a traditional forensic tool, I'll call it, there's no way to put that back together. So I don't think to this day anybody's ever figured that out, other than our solutions that work on the Mac.
Not like a RAID system in a Windows environment, I guess you could say. It's it's you would think it would work like that, but it does not. So,
yeah, and what was even more interesting was back in the day, let's say that Apple had like just a single physical disk, not a Fusion drive, it would still use core storage, right, to actually interact with that disk. And then that's when all the forensics tools broke. Like all the forensics tools that you know and love, they all broke back then, and nobody could load an actual image of a Mac for about a year or two. So like it took them a long time to figure out how to catch up to do a single disk core storage. But I don't even think to this day anybody can do a dual disk core storage or traditional Fusion drive. So that makes it really hard to deal with as well. Like this is just the beginnings, and this stuff, and it gets worse.
So, I know.
So, if you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
This is the output of just basically a command in the Mac to just say, hey, here, just list my disks, right? Just list my disks in my Mac. And if we know, like, if we're familiar with like how Linux does stuff with like SDA or HDA and HDB and HDA, that's kind of like the naming conventions. Well, in Mac, right, it starts with disk zero.
Yep.
And then that would be your first physical disk. And then, each other one, it would be like, disk 1, disk 2, disk 3. Those would be your subsequent physical disks. But if you look at this one here, and you can see there's a disk 3 there, right? So you would think in your mind, okay, this must have 4 physical disks in it. It only has 1. And so as we go down it, and this is probably better where I show you like an actual terminal. I can bring that up for you really quick right here. So let me go ahead and bring that up. And I'll run this command. So it's a simple command you can run. It's just a diskutil list. So disk it to list, and that was the output, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to walk through this, how crazy this is, right? So what we have, and I'll do it fast really quick. So you have a physical disk, a real traditional physical disk that has a logical volume that's used to make a synthesized disk that creates a container scheme. And under that container disk, you're going to have virtualized volumes. There's the Macintosh HD, but that's not the one that you're looking for that you see up here. And then you have a Macintosh HD down here. That's not the one you're really looking for. That's only part of what you're looking for. And you need to kind of combine this with the other one, but you don't combine it with this one. You combine it with this one, which is a snapshot. So that snapshot plus that data volume there is what makes your Macintosh HD. And those are virtualized volumes underneath the container disk, which is synthesized from a logical volume off of a real traditional physical disk. Do you see how complicated this can be?
Oh, it's tremendous. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to just pretend to be caught up with it. But yes, but that's that's what we deal with on a daily basis, though. Is that when dealing with Macs.
I can make this a little bit easier, right? So I'll make this super simple for you.
Yeah, dim it down for our viewers, just so in case pretend I'm the dumbest guy in the room or in the world. Yeah. Just go ahead and
yeah. So the best thing to remember is everybody's familiar with physical disks and logical volumes.
Right.
We're going to add one more layer in the middle, and that's going to be a container disk. So that basically that real secondary like partition, right? That second partition here, we see disk 0 slice 2. That second partition is used to create this container here, right? You see we have this container scheme. So don't worry about the zeros here, but it's the partition scheme or container scheme. So that logical partition makes this synthesized disk. And see the size here, I have a 1 terabyte drive. So it's about 1 terabyte, right?
Yes.
So it makes it about a 1 terabyte container. And underneath the 1 terabyte container, you have all these different volumes. Most of these are read-only. So you don't have to worry about them. The only one you really have to worry about is that one right there. That is your data volume. So you can see that's larger than everything else I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 132 gigabytes right now. That's where all the data that a user or the system can store. Because here's what's interesting, right? What Apple does now is they use what's called signed system volumes. So when you download an update or install Mac OS, right, it has to be connected to the internet. It goes back and checks with Apple servers that it is authorized to run on your unique specific piece of hardware, and that it actually matches the hash values that they have, right? So then you get your system volume is right here, and that's going to include all your system files, everything for the computer run, basically your kernel, right? And native applications. Then what happens is that everything's verified to be okay. It makes a snapshot of itself, which is this one right here. So we see disk 3, slice 1, snapshot 1. So it basically duplicates the system volume, which is read-only. See 9.1 and 9.1, they're the same. And it's also read-only, right? Then you have your pre-boot and recovery, which is for recovering your operating system, different things working within that environment. They're read-only, so nothing to worry about there. The only thing, and then the VM here is for swap virtual memory stuff, but you can see it's always small and it's encrypted. It's kilobytes as opposed to megabytes or gigabytes. So nothing to see there, nothing to worry about. Right here is what you have to worry about. This is the only place a user or the system itself can write non-persistent data, like, data that didn't come down with the system itself, from the download. That technically is the only thing you need to image.
I got you. So, okay, so when you have the slice 1, the snapshot it takes, that is just Apple talking to the computer, correct? Like the verification of saying yes, everything's legit here, correct?
Yeah. So check this out. It's just like what we do in forensics, right? We make a copy of the original, right? And we work off the copy and we put the original away. So this is the original. We make a copy. We work off of this and put the other away. But and same thing, right? When we look off even the copy of it, we write protect it. So the same thing. It's write protected, write protected. That's the only thing that you can write data to.
Yep. And so that's all right. Got it. Perfect.
So it makes sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So but so here's the crazy thing, right? To interpret all this stuff, it's very, very complicated. It's very proprietary, and anything other than a Mac is going to have a hard time doing it, right? So anything other Mac, you have to reverse engineer and try to pull this data or try to make sense of it, and that's what it is. It's reverse engineering. Yeah. And the problem with that, not to bash anybody's doing it, because there's smart people that do this stuff, right? It's just you're not always going to get it 100% perfect. Where if you use a Mac to do a Mac, you will always get it 100% perfect.
So it's almost the puzzle you have as kids, the square and the circle hole type thing.
Yeah,
It,
exactly.
it
Yep. And I actually
you can
use that
probably
in,
jam it down, but it's not gonna be 100%. Yeah, it's not gonna be
yeah,
the
it's
most
not gonna,
pretty thing in the world.
yeah, we can bang things pretty hard, but it's not always going to
Yeah,
be perfect. Which, that brings me to this next slide, which I'll talk about here, right? So I kind of mentioned that this data partition is the only thing that you can write to. So, well, what about the rest of it? So, like, I have a 1 terabyte drive in here. In this example here, I have 113 gigs. So, and I said that's the only thing you need to image. Well, why bother imaging anything else, right? So everybody's like, well, for deleted files, and that becomes another issue. So Mac, way back since 10.6, 10.7, or late versions of 10.6, have trim turned on for any SSDs that were installed by Apple. So if you have any SSD installed by Apple since then, trim's turned on by default. And basically, the way trim works is that if it preserves the longevity of the SSD, but in order for it to work, any files that are deleted, it clears those out instantly. So that, because nothing can be written to a cell that has data in it, so trim clears it out immediately to
gotcha.
just to prepare for and it tries to basically do wear leveling and stuff like that. So the people what people have to understand is that's an instantaneous process. It's literally like nanoseconds that a file, once you do the file, it's truly gone.
And
So
it's fluid as it happens. It's not like once a day it does it clears. It's
exactly.
continuously cleaning up.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
not like the old days and the old controller files and stuff like this.
right.
Is like, and nowadays there's, the logic boards in a Mac are just one piece, right? You have a system on chip with the SoCs, right? The Apple Silicon processors, the actual the area where your SSDs typically are they're just soldered. They're integrated with the logic board, I should say. I don't want to say soldered. They're integrated with the logic board. So it's literally one piece. It's just one piece. You're not pulling it off. You're not doing ISP. You're not doing chip off because of something we can talk about later, like secure enclaves. So again, back to that data volume that's here, right? If there's nothing to recover in free space, let's say, if there was any free space out there to be recovered from, there's nothing there. Trim takes care of it. So the only thing you really need to get is the data volume. So
Gotcha.
instead of imaging like a full terabyte, you really, in this situation here, just have to go for 114
Yeah,
gigabytes.
I understand. Yes, yep.
Yeah, so that's another hard thing for people to understand, because everybody's just sold on doing, the how do I say, just going out and grabbing the full disk. So
Well,
now,
good. Like you said though, but that traditionally that's what we were taught. So anybody who's been
yeah,
doing this for any time, it's that's what
and
everybody's that's
yep,
the way of thinking. So
and
that's the way we're trained.
all the things your grandmother told you keep coming back in your head, right?
You're right.
Old habits are hard to die.
Right.
You teach a dog new tricks, right? Like all these things, I hear it every day. I see it every day. So now, what about deleted files, right? There was a point in time where, because of, I'm going to say, creative marketing, right? There was claims that you recover deleted files from APFS, which again, if trim takes care of everything, then the answer is no. So what you can recover, if it exists, is local time machine snapshots. And that's really important to understand too, especially by doing things natively, like using a Mac to do a Mac, or truly Mac native technologies, because Mac will always understand Mac. And the way that we approach things with what we do in our training and also within our tools is just use Mac native technology to do stuff, because it's 100% correct all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes sense, right? Now, deleted files, right? So you're familiar with time machine backups, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so a time machine backup is just Mac's native automatic backup process, right? You connect a disk or something that can store backups, and it'll say, "Do you want to use it as a backup?" You go, "Yes," and then just every time you have it connected, it's going to back up to that disk, every hour in the hour. Now, the question is, do you know what happens when you don't have that disk connected anymore?
No, I do not. No.
So it still makes a backup, but now it's backing up locally. And so what happens is it's going to back up not as thorough as you would with the disconnected, like the time machine disconnected, but it still backed it up. So, and a lot of people don't know this, especially when we're doing investigations. It's most users of a Mac don't know that their machine is still backing up to a local disk. So I can give you an example of this as well too. So let me just go back down to my terminal again here, and let me clear this up. So if we do tmutil list local snapshots, and we're going to point it to root. and I see I have one snapshot for this disk right now, right? So I could have had my time machine disk connected recently, or maybe it's overwritten itself or something, but I do have a local time machine snapshot, which was a few hours ago, like the beginning of the hour. Yep, the beginning of the hour, so not too long ago. Now, this will continue throughout the day. This will continue throughout the day. Now, the great thing about this is I've deleted a bunch of files before we did this presentation. Like, let me clean up my desktop, like clean my house, right? Maybe I'm a bad guy and those were incriminating files, illicit files, or something like that. And I threw them away and I emptied my trash. And I'm thinking, like, okay, I'm good. Nobody's going to catch me. It's probably in here. It's probably captured in that snapshot. So if you know how to process these snapshots, you can recover the actual full files, the dates and times, everything, the paths, all that stuff in here. It's literally the way APFS works. It can make a snapshot in an instant, and you have everything.
And
so
then
everything's going to be there.
I don't want to get ahead of your presentation. Where is that stored in that data mix that we talked about a few slides ago?
So that's the interesting part of this, right? It's on the data partition.
Okay.
So it's actually in a data partition. It's not like off in there, but you can't navigate it to it in the GUI.
Okay.
So you can't. So it's not like it's there and it's allocated, right? But it's nothing that you can access through the GUI. You're going to have to use Apple native commands to access it.
You're going to have to go command line for this.
Yep,
okay.
and mount it, and even better, they offer you the ability to do differential analysis, which is what we do with our imaging tools, right? So we have with Recon ITR, for example, with our tools, we built in the ability to not only identify the snapshots at the time of imaging, but do differential analysis at the time of imaging, and only get you what you need. So the thing is, you're not going to like say there's 13 local time machine snapshots. You don't want another 13 8-terabyte images, right?
Right.
You just want to get what you want. So there's certain things that you're going to look for within those snapshots. We pull those out for you, and that all can be done, with just a simple command here with TMUtil, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. Wow. Nice. I learn something new every day, and this is definitely something I've learned today. So
yeah, it's important to know about it, because what was happening in the past is that other tools were basically just trying to carve that data, and then if you ever try to carve from an SSD, right, it's not going to be how do I say this? It's not going to be oh my gosh, I'm having a little thing here. It's going to be fragmented, right? It's going to be it's not going to be all together. So it's going to be, maybe you're going to get a small chunk, like a cluster size or a block size, and that's all you're going to get. So it makes it very difficult to even carve that to recover deleted files, because most files are going to be larger than 4096, right?
Right.
So it's going to be great. So
it's like just getting a big box of different Lego parts out of the closet. It's nothing,
exactly.
Nothing's connected. You just have a big
that's
box.
A good example.
You got a big box of parts. Yeah.
That's a very good analogy. And then the other thing that makes things more difficult is Apple still uses File Vault, which is their built-in software encryption. So they have hardware encryption and they also have software encryption in addition to proprietary technologies. And you can think of File Vault as like any other type of software encryption, like BitLocker in Windows or something like that. But there's a difference of how this works between your Intel Max, the traditional Intel Max, your Intel Max with a T2, and then your Apple Silicon processors now. But it's still something that you can have in all those situations. So, even though everything's hardware encrypted now and you have the secure enclaves, you can still turn on File Vault on top of it, or you can have external drives that are still locked up with File Vault. So again, that's another thing to be aware of when you're doing your examinations or when you're dealing with your imaging. Passwords are definitely going to be the key going forward for everyone. In any Mac investigations, without a password, you're pretty much done.
Yep. So, they don't, the submitting agencies or detectives, they don't like to hear that, but that's I almost want to have you on loop in our intake area saying that. This way they fully understand that that's actually the case. That's the reality today with that.
Oh yeah, that's a hard thing to understand too, because we're on autopilot when we go out there. So from software encryption to hardware encryption, right? So the T2 was the first that was introduced to the desktops or the Macs themselves as far as hardware-based encryption. and everybody still remembers the T2 because it was scary when it first
Yes.
came out. Like
Yeah.
it's the end of Mac forensics type thing. And then basically the equivalent of what the T2 does is built into Apple Silicon processors, and it's just called a secure enclave. So the secure enclave, which is what a T2 chipset really is built into all Apple Silicon processors, and it'll be that way forever, right? So without knowing without authenticating, to the system, right, to the
Mm-hmm.
hardware, there's no way to decrypt the data. So Macs are essentially like giant iPhones. Because you probably remember, do you remember back in the day when you couldn't take a physical image anymore of an iPhone?
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's because at the time they made all the data on disk encrypted, and they used a core of the processors, one of the cores, to actually do the decryption, and then they built their own security processor to decrypt it, secure enclave, which was the T1. They enhanced that, made a T2, and they're like, hey, let's just throw that into the Mac. And oh, by the way, since we're making our own chips, let's just build that into the chipset itself.
Yes.
So all data on Macs are encrypted at rest. There's no way to ISP, chip off, remove them, image them, nothing. You have to pass the data through the secure enclave once you've authenticated. So that's the important thing. So that little, bright yellow thing at the bottom there, an admin password must be known in order to access the data. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. There's no way to get it. So you're just done.
And I say this every episode that I do. I have an iPhone. I have Macs. The American citizen in me loves the fact that Apple makes this extremely difficult or protects everything for the user. But then again, the due diligent police officer in me finds it to be quite the pain in the butt that they make it so difficult for us, even though we do all the right things with all the legal process and all the proper protocols and procedures. So it's sort of like I'm in a constant, Bruce Banner, the Hulk type situation where I'm just always in a conflict. But
yeah, the way I explain it, right, is like as long as you're not doing anything wrong, you have a right to privacy.
That's right. Yeah.
The minute
Yeah.
you step over the line and you're endangering someone's life or something like that, then you don't have a right to privacy anymore.
Yeah.
That's, if I can make my own state or country, but no. So you're right. Apple has the ability, I guess, how do you say it, has the responsibility of protecting users' data, which of course, right, you want to protect users' data for those that are doing good, right, that are not doing anything bad. And they can't come out there and say, well, we made a back door for any reason, right? Because it would be a security thing. But it is important to us as law enforcement that, when we do have to protect the public, or if it's a national security issue, that, we do need to have ways of getting into it. But
sure.
It's becoming trickier. And, so a password is key when you're doing your investigations, or if first responders are going out, they got to be trained to ask for it, or at least know what the legal authority is to do to gain access, or even use biometrics.
Yeah. Is there I don't know if you're going to get into it. I don't want to jump ahead. RAM analysis you can do if you come across a live Mac or anything?
You know what? For the longest time, the answer was no. Right? The answer was no. It used to be, right? You used to be able to image Mac RAM just like it was a regular, like a disk in the computer. But then they protected it. And then there were some tools out there that you could actually image them, but it was it was tricky to do it because it had kernel conflicts, right?
Yeah.
Then Apple has everything signed now, all your applications, all your kernel extensions. So anything that has to interact with the kernel, which is the real, deep down operating system, the true operating system, that also has to be signed by Apple. And I wasn't aware of anything until recently that could interact with Mac RAM, but there is one tool out there that can. And that is, I want to say this wrong, but it's Volcano and Surge, I believe, from the guys that did the old volatility tools. So that's their commercial version of the tools now. So you can check them out. They actually have signed kernel extensions to image RAM. And that's the only tools I know of to do it right now.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, because I haven't recent years even heard anything about it, so I don't know if I was missing out on something, or if that was just something that doesn't happen anymore. So
no, it's they've been doing it, but it's, again, they're the only ones that I know of that have the actual authority to do it, and so it's legit. So
cool.
It's not one of those ones that again, somebody just makes one and hope it doesn't crash the system.
Right.
So let's see what else we got in here. Oh, logical imaging. So we talked about physical imaging, and a lot of people want to do it. But then nowadays, when you're dealing with everything that's being synthesized and virtualized and kind of smashed together magically to make that Macintosh HD, right? There's a lot of times now that you don't need to do full disk imaging, or it's impossible to do it. So that's something that everybody's just going to have to understand and try to work with. And if you go back to what I showed you before, right, with the data volume, it's the only place that you can write data, right? Either the system or a user. It's the only place changes can be made, right? So that's technically the only thing that you need to do an analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually makes life easier once you wrap your head around it, and you get past the point that you don't have to image the whole disk, right? So there's different types of imaging, which I can show you a little screenshot here at the end. It does get kind of tricky with all the different scenarios that you can run into. But when you do logical imaging, that does introduce, right, some other challenges like changes to timestamps, right?
Right.
Anytime that you take a file from one location and put it on another location, you're changing timestamps. So that's something that has to be considered when you're doing this type of imaging as well. So, and then plus those extended attributes, right? Those are the things that are also really important to capture. And then that's super proprietary to the Mac. And if you don't do your imaging right, you lose that as well. So you're changing timestamps and losing extended attributes. So you have to be really careful about doing your imaging and how you do it. So that's kind of leads up to where I am now. It's like, what actually do you image, right? So there's kind of two schools of thoughts on this, and option one and option two. So option one is where you do imaging, and that is going to then lead to reverse engineering to pull the artifacts out, right? So there's one school of thought where, or I guess I should say one way that others do it, where they're going to go traditionally for like the synthesized disk.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to, like, if you got 8 terabytes, but you're only using 100 gigabytes, you're going to have to image all 8 terabytes
Yeah.
to do the reverse engineering. So they'll do the hard way. I say the hard way, right? Reinvent the wheel. They go out there and they'll do really smart things and try to reverse engineer those containers and synthesized disks to pull out any artifacts that they can. And then option two is the way that we like to go, which is just native imaging. So, there's tons, like Apple knows Apple, Macs understands Macs, and there's tons of, integrated commands and binary that's there that you can use to image the Mac and retain everything. So that's the option that we traditionally teach in our classes, and what we integrate in our tools. So those are the two different ways to do it. And the problem is that I've found over time when I'm talking to people is because traditional forensics tools have been just, bashed into people's heads for so long. You got to get a new one, you got to get XO1, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to get a physical disk. And then when you tell them they don't have to, and to use like, Apple native formats because Apple understands Apple and Mac understands Mac,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to listen to you. That's, again, back to the red blue pill thing, right? They just want to take the blue pill and live in the world the way they want to,
Right.
and think that everything's the same. But so the easiest thing I can say is anytime you step outside of the Mac ecosystem, you're going to lose data. There's a chance you're going to lose data completely, or not be able to do your job, either at the time of imaging or at the time of analysis. At any point, right, that you step off of a truly native, Mac platform or analysis tool, then you're actually going to lose some data. It's no one has got it 100% correct, but Macs always understand a Mac. So when, like, for example, when we do those classes down at IACIS, our basically the introductory class and then the advanced class, we don't show you any of our tools. We just use the Mac that you bring with you.
Yeah.
Because you can do everything with the Mac that you have right here. Automated tools are exactly that. They're just automation. They're just making it faster, that what you can do manually. So we really, really focus on, just understanding what's happening, how you can do it, manually, and do it yourself just in case you have to. And that's another good point, right? So like, how many forensics tools out there that that can do all 4 million apps on the App Store? Like in Google or none.
No,
So
and that's why I was a mobile device instructor for a couple of years, and that's what you teach is fill in the blanks. And it's no offense to the software companies, they just can't. They're trying to keep up with the apps and all the updates. So it's up to you to go into the databases to find the missing pieces, manually.
Yeah. So little known fact, right? So I went back to an iPhone, but I was a Pixel user forever. And I remember that, there would be like applications that would update like 3 times a day, the same application. Like, how's any forensic,
Right.
developers feel comfortable to keep up with that? It's impossible. So you are going to have to kind of rely on doing manual analysis. It's just the way things are.
Yes. Yes. And I ran into that option one you have there. That's what I ran into last week when we talked earlier in this week. I think I maybe had less than 256 of actual data, but it wanted to bring over the whole, it was 4 terabytes. And
Yeah,
now I was like, oh my, I'm trying to lessen that. So I don't have 4 terabytes, and that's just size wise. Just trying to limit that. So, and really, so what it is, when you say it's Mac to Mac, you're essentially, when you connect your target or your suspect Mac to, I guess what you want to call it, your forensic Mac, it just sees it as another external drive, for lack of better, for a little rudimentary, or how does it see it? I mean,
well, that gets tricky because now you have different options. So that's why we have a decision tree. So this one's designed for ITR, but you can use it if you're doing manual analysis as well. Because if you look at the first 2 questions there, does your Mac have an Apple Silicon processor, or does it have a T2 security chipset? So your first question is it Intel or is it Apple Silicon? Because you're talking about, can you make it connected to another Mac and make it be seen like it's an external drive?
right.
If it's Intel, the answer is yes. If it's Apple Silicon, the answer is no. So
and that's what I've run into. I have a Mac from NCFI 2019, which is Intel based, and now it's just pretty much, I mean, just put that thing away in the museum of Macs. But that's that. Well, I've workarounds with other Macintoshes, but my actual forensic Mac is now, unless I got a grandfathered Mac, it's sort of a relic. It's going to soon to be my not my off-duty machine, my undercover machine. When I have to, for the investigations we run, obviously the ICAC part of it, it's just going to be my undercover. So
yeah, so the answer is it depends, right? It depends how you do it. So that's where it got so complicated, and this is kind of like a little diagram that we put together. It kind of looks like a subway map. And that's where yeah, well, that was probably me drunk in London Sunday, looking at the tube, right?
Going, mind the gap.
Yeah, probably thinking that and going, oh man, this would make a great chart for forensic imaging. It's just like things just pop in my head at the weirdest times. And you can see at the little legend at the left-hand corner there where we have like the M1 line, which would be your Apple Silicon chips, and your blue is going to be your Intel T2 chips, and green's the Fusion drive, and then your purple or magenta or whatever color you want to call it is going to be your non-T2 Intel. So, which would be the easiest one, but there's a lot of decisions you have to make. And the biggest ones are like the first 2 is it Intel or is it Apple Silicon? Then the next question is, if it's Intel, does it have a T2, security chip into it? The next question beyond that is, do you have the password, right? And then you have Fusion drives, you have File Vault. So there's all these different variables that can be introduced, into your imaging that you have to consider at the time of imaging, which is why we put this chart together. So because it's too complicated to give you like, oh, we just do this all the time,
right?
Because
yeah,
it's not just do this all the time. So this is the kind of like the shortcuts to get you there faster to where you're going.
Yeah, and it should be like, or you are here. The no.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can stop now.
So we're also doing is we're actually in the middle of a very big, huge recode right now of all of our software because Apple killed the Intel chipsets, which gives us the ability, to move on now. It's like, okay, it's done. They're done with Intel now. They officially announced it. Now we can just move on, right, with just Apple Silicon and the future of Mac. So a lot of the stuff that we're reintroducing into the tools is better logic, right? So where you don't have to think, it's more along the lines of, if we can figure it out for you so you don't have to because you have other important things to do, we're integrating that. So yeah.
Awesome.
So let's see what we got here. Oh, this is really important. So viewing the wrong timestamp. So I mentioned before in the very beginning of this that there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're not using a Mac to look at a Mac or a truly Mac native tool, or trying to reverse engineer stuff. And what can happen is you could either be looking at the wrong timestamps or not even see the correct timestamps. And that's kind of something that we definitely should hit upon or talk about, because you're familiar with your, and this is no pun intended, right? Your Mac times, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, your modified access created, right? Everybody's familiar with that. So there's certain POSIX or Unix timestamps that are very similar to, the Windows timestamps, and everybody's just familiar with them. Now, what most traditional tools do is they pull out the POSIX timestamps because Mac is based on Unix, and it's easy for them to do that. And an example that we can use is like this screenshot. We're using StatX to look at a file, and then we can see the different Unix timestamps. What most people don't understand, these are the wrong timestamps. The Mac ignores these timestamps. And so think about this. Pretty much every forensics tool in the world is using these timestamps for your analysis, and these are the wrong timestamps. So that's a huge problem. And this has been going on for a long time, which I've screamed about it all the time. So what you should be looking at is extended attribute timestamps. So, and this is where it becomes, extended attributes are something that's built into the Mac operating system and its file system. So again, it's native to the Mac. Using a Mac to look at a Mac, you're totally fine. But back when Macs introduced, or Apple introduced Spotlight for Mac OS, the ability to do indexing and searching, they created extended attributes, and that's where their timestamps now live. So the timestamps that are used by the Mac are extended attribute timestamps, and that's what you need to look at. And there's more than just 3 or 4. There's probably like 30 or 40 of them that are out there right now that you can use to do your analysis instead of 3 or 4. So 10 times the amount, let's put it that way. And these are the correct ones. And this is, really interesting, because I can give you an example of this as well. So let me just see if I can do this really quick. And I got to go back to my handy dandy trusty terminal. I want to say notebook from Blue's Clues, but I'm not gonna. I had kids of that age. So, all right, so here we go. So if I do a StatX, right, StatX, and I'm going to bring this picture in here, right? It's a 100th anniversary for our state police agency.
Oh, nice.
State Police. Yeah, so they got a lot of retro vehicles right now, like labeled and stuff.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, it's awesome. So when I hit return now with StatX, right, there's our Unix timestamps, right? So that's totally fine, right? Totally good and fine. But check this out, right? Look at that access timestamp. Now, here's something that Apple did that's really interesting, right? If I do and look out the extended attributes, MBLS, right? And I want to look at the date last used on this one now, right? If I go up and find a date last used, which will be up here, last used date, it says 6/22, right? Not today, right? Not today. It's 6/22, because this actually is a very interesting extended attribute timestamp. It tracks when a user literally opens the file, like click, and opens the file, right? So pay attention to this right here, 6/22. Pay attention to this right here, right? Right there, 5/4, 5/17, 6/22, right? Now watch what happens. I'm going to open this now the traditional way. Double click on it, and I'm opening it, and I'm going to close it. Now I'll rerun this command again, right? And let's go back up and let's look at the last use date now. See that?
7/28.
It's changed.
Yeah.
Right? See down here for last used dates down here? It's an additional one. This is every day that I, as a human being, open this file, or a human being open this file by going click. That's extended attributes. These are the timestamps you have to focus on, not the the POSIX timestamps or Unix timestamps, because they'll lead you in the wrong direction.
Okay.
Because what happens, like system processes and daemons that are running on the Mac, they can change those timestamps by just running over those files. Like a scan or a reindexing or whatever can change that access date, and you can incorrectly state or assume, right, hey, the access date says this, so the user must have accessed it. The system can access that file and change that timestamp. And you're looking at it, so that's why Apple does it this way. So Apple makes new timestamps. And you can see all kinds of really interesting things in here, right? In addition to just, the timestamps themselves, right? These extended attributes tell me where it came from, right? This is who sent it. This is who received it. It was sent through AirDrop. It came from this phone, right? So I AirDropped this picture from my phone is what happened. That's why you're seeing me in there twice. But if somebody else AirDrops it to me, I can see all their information, including sometimes their phone number.
So you can get airdrop information from this. So if somebody, photobombs you or something like that, the New York City photobomb things, or it happens on airplanes, there's an actual forensic way to find out who airdropped you.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this. If you accept the file, right? If you
Yeah.
accept the file and they actually put their true information in there, yes, you can retrieve some of the stuff.
But okay, it's like I could, like, my Mac at the office is FBI surveillance van, and my other one is This Is Not China. But
Yeah,
it would just show whatever I titled it. Would it show any other?
exactly.
Would it show any other identifying information to that machine that's actually in the machine itself,
Yeah, it would just
like
look
a
like
MAC
this.
address or anything? Just that. Okay.
No, nothing
Okay.
like that. So, but there are handshakes that occur, right? So that's something where we get into advanced analysis with logging. So
Okay.
if you have different, so another interesting about Macs is if you don't turn logging on, like if you're not looking at the logs, you get less logs,
Okay.
right? So if you're actively looking at logs at the same time or running logs at the same time somebody sends you an airdrop, there's a lot more data that you can retrieve, and you can get the handshake information as
Yes.
well. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really neat stuff. It's a lot of stuff to take in. So let me see what else I got in here as well. Yeah, so I talked about the extended attributes. We kind of talked about that. So the most important thing to understand is that no other operating systems or anything else out there other than the Mac itself is going to get you all these extended attributes,
Mhm.
right? So like for example, I'm playing with the newest version of iOS 17 and the newest version of Mac OS Sonoma that's going to come out, and there's new extended attributes, right? So a lot of people that are actually parsing these extended attributes and trying to support them tools are using open source tools that haven't been supported in years. So the thing is like, when new stuff comes out, they may be years behind in actually extracting any extended attributes, and it's an afterthought. It's not something that's built into the analysis of the tool. So that's something to consider as well. So if you literally give me a Mac image right now, and I can basically solve the case and mount it and solve the case right in probably about 5 minutes. Give me a few keywords, I can get very far into the case within 5 minutes. Just
Nice.
because using a Mac to do a Mac. So you remember how you pre-process everything? Pick any tool that you can
Oh,
think of.
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You start the tool and then you go home for the
Go
weekend.
home. Yeah, go home. It's like crock pot cooking. Yeah, crock
Yeah,
pot
yeah.
forensics. Yeah.
You hope it's done when you get back. I hope the electricity can go out, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
the nice thing about Macs is that its indexing is done at the time of imaging. So when the indexing when you image a Mac, you're capturing the indexing. It's already done for you. The Mac indexes itself all the time.
That's great. Yeah.
So if you use that during your analysis, or if you know if your tools can do that, right? If you can actually do it the native way, right? It's already done. It's already done there's no waiting, and you can start right away. 5 minutes, you're up and running. It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah. So again, we talked about statics and MDLS. And the last thing I'll just end it with, unless you have questions, right, is the kind of the future of Mac forensics. Some things to keep in mind. That the first one to keep in mind is that there's no more Intel Macs that are being sold.
Right.
So everything is all Apple Silicon now. So you're going to have to adopt the new ways, right? It's a little different to image an Apple Silicon Mac or process an Apple Silicon Mac as opposed to an Intel Mac. So no more of that, right? Any, like, for example, if you think you're going to find something boot camp, no more boot camp, right? Boot camp's gone.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be in a VM if you're dealing with Windows or other operating systems on a Mac. So that you're always going to be required to use a password, right? You're going to have it to actually be able to get all the data, right? So that's going to be so make sure you adjust your policies and procedures, or if you have any influence over shaping laws, future laws regarding that, then keep that in mind, to make things easier for the good guys. Secure enclaves are going to exist in every Mac going forward. And then I heard a rumor, which again, these are just rumors and stuff, that at sometime in the future that iOS devices won't even have any ports.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That they're going to go to all that. I mean, they'll if they do, they'll make sure that's proprietary, where you got to buy 5 more different things to go with it and charge your phone or your computer or what have you. Not, but that wouldn't surprise me. Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. So I know my old Bose system doesn't work anymore with my iPhones, obviously, because they changed the port, and it just, who knows? Everything's Bluetooth. Elon Musk will do something in space with it where the satellites come down and charge something. I don't know. There'll be some kind
Yeah,
of.
the world is changing quickly. Not only global warming with the heat that we're dealing with right now, but the technology as well. I just saw in the news today that T-Mobile is teaming up with Starlink and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
so
Oh, and
yeah.
now aliens exist. And everybody's like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
we're like, well, yeah, we kind of knew that. I mean, you didn't have to. It wasn't a big surprise,
Yeah,
government.
don't get me started on the conspiracy theories. I love that stuff.
Oh, that's my other podcast I host. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's some other famous guys out there. Yeah. My old conspiracy theories when they were doing Independence Day and all those other movies with Will Smith and stuff, they would just get everybody like psyched up to fight aliens.
That's funny you said that. I that's what we talked about in my office yesterday. Was that all of this that's happening is like the '80s. You had Red Dawn, War Games, Spies Like Us. It was all to desensitize us towards nuclear war and what would happen
Yep.
if the Russians attacked. And now then lately it was aliens where we're so desensitized, or it's common ground for alien invasions that we're just like, well, whatever, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like get it over with.
Right, right. It's just, but I'll tell you when that happens, that's when all the build the spaceships. I'm sure all the plumbers, the welders, everybody like that, mechanical engineers will come out of nowhere to build spaceships or whatever. Well, no, what was that movie? That was the one with the asteroid. I'm sorry, that was Deep Impact, where they had to make those special space shuttles, and then Armageddon too, of course. It came out that same summer. But yeah, we could go on and on about that. Steve, this is fantastic. I think I broke out in a sweat during that fire hose. That's an excellent material for everybody to listen to watch. I know I learned a lot. I was trying to take notes, even though I have access to it like everybody else will once we publish this thing. You guys are located in Delaware, correct? Right?
Yeah.
Because I know you lived there with the school there, Delaware State Police, but the business, of course, is there. Tell us what goes on in Delaware. I know you got that big bridge that goes into Maryland, or maybe the one that comes from New Jersey, Dewey Beach. What else? What's happening in Delaware these days?
Delaware, not well. What can I say? We have resorts, right? So it's kind of an interesting kind of state. It's 3 counties, just very small, right?
Okay.
Second small state, positioned very well, right? It's
Mhm.
driving distance just about everywhere. Cool. No taxes, no state taxes.
Oh wow, okay.
Or sales tax. Sorry,
Yeah,
no sales
okay.
tax. So what you see is what you pay, which is super nice, right? We were actually able to acquire. When we were looking for another building we were releasing before. We acquired a historical property. It's recorded with the Library of Congress. It's a little known fact that people don't know is that Delaware was #1 for peaches first.
Really?
Yes, and this little farm field that's behind me where we are was all peach trees all the way out to south of Dover Air Force Base and Barker Landing and stuff there. But a blight came in early 1900s and then killed off most of the peach trees. So that's when we lost the lead. But the building that we're actually in is an old historic peach factory barn,
Okay.
basically. It's a 2-story wooden barn. It's about 18,000 square feet that we've preserved and rescued and renovated it for our use. But when we say renovated, I just basically preserved history. I tried not to change anything.
Sure. Yeah.
So we did everything that we could to just basically bring it up to the code that we needed for what we do here with the Tolinos and everything that we
the
build.
electric. Yeah.
But it's beautiful because we undid 130 years of other businesses being in here and just shown the original woodwork and the beams. They're all hand hewn using wooden dowels to hold it together.
Oh wow.
I get scared because I'm feeling like if I pull one out, it's gonna be like Jenga. And stuff.
Yeah.
But the wood is like petrified. If you try to screw anything into it, it's impossible. It's crazy. But so anyway, we have like a campus here, which is very nice. 3 separate buildings. As far as what else is in Delaware, we're known for Delaware blue crabs like Chesapeake Bay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, our beaches area, the lower counties, right? You're gonna either have on the eastern side, you're gonna have all our resorts like Rehoboth and Dewey. Everybody knows Dewey is the party, one of the top 10 party areas in there. So when you go western Sussex County, that's God's country. So we just have our state fair that just went on here, and that's where you have it's a traditional state fair, deep fried Twinkies and everything else you can get.
Yes.
Right? So Kent County is kind of where Dover Air Force Base. We have the NASCAR track here.
Yes.
And that's where Firefly used to be. They skipped it this past year. And then Newcastle. So anything above the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, we call that, like everything below is lower Delaware or lower, slower Delaware. And then everything above it is just, the metropolitan area. So you have Wilmington and all the stuff here, DuPont's, that came from here and that kind of established a lot of history, a lot of colonial towns that are in here, a lot of small towns, beautiful drives, little great places to visit. One of the things I was actually thinking about doing, if I ever have a chance to be home, but the next trip out for my wife and I, just to de-stress a little bit, is go out and look at all the covered bridges in Delaware.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so I keep my little Westie out and go right around for the day.
Nice.
And tons of great breweries here, like little breweries. Of course, Dogfish is here. Everybody knows Dogfish. Yeah, but there's a lot of other great breweries down here too, and vineyards and stuff. And interesting thing about the vineyards, our area here is very similar to the Rheingau in Germany, so we can produce similar type grapes.
Okay.
Yeah, for the climate, because we're basically in a peninsula.
I've only driven through because I'm originally from New York. I got a brother in southern Jersey, really Philadelphia, but he's on the Jersey side, and I got another brother in Maryland. So, and I just saw a Springsteen concert in Philly. Then my brother and I drove back to Maryland. So of course we drove through Delaware and just from what the highway was showing us. But I've driven through many times, maybe stopped, but I one of the states I always wanted to see and really absorb, it just never got to me just yet.
Yeah, so. It's a great place. I mean, the part you went through is just to collect your $14 or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
The rest of the state is wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of great small towns. Like I said, I love the older I get, the more I love history. So
same. Yeah.
So I like to go out and find stuff. I even got into little amateur metal detecting, because when we were excavating the crawl space down here, I wanted to make sure we encapsulated it, for eco part, but I didn't want to cover up anything that potentially be down there. So I bought a little metal detector to go around and find stuff, and found some really cool artifacts.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And then I found that there was other police officers that are into that hobby too, and I've kind of wandered out with them and followed them around and found a bunch of little trinkets and stuff. So it's kind of fun.
That's awesome. You mentioned Delaware being the leader in peaches at one point, right?
Yeah.
So, in Georgia, of course, the peach state, the peach bowl, peach this, peach that. I live in South Carolina now, and I'm not throwing gasoline on a fire or anything, but the upstate of South Carolina alone produces more peaches than the whole state of Georgia. I'm just leaving it there. They could. There's the facts are the facts. So, but that's my little tidbit on peaches. You said the whole building is wood, so you have nothing but high-end electronics running 24 hours a day and petrified wood. Do you just buy Murphy's oil by the gallon to keep everything moist and porous, or what?
We actually did we had some we had some really great engineers that came in here before we renovated the building that were some friends of mine.
Okay.
One of the best engineering firms in the state that came out and helped us do a plan. So there's some structural stuff that we had to do. And of course we brought everything up to code. My biggest thing is I didn't want to destroy the value of the property itself, right, and try to be very minimalistic, but we had to add a lot of new electric in here. We had to make sure it was fire. Everything's in basically sure, in conduit and stuff, proper conduit. We had to do the fire stuff, and everything was done properly. So it's just kind of cool. It's like I think if forensics doesn't work out, I am going to turn this into a pub brewery. Man,
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
So
you can come up with a cool digital forensics name tied in with beer. I don't know what I can't come up with anything offhand, but that would be an awesome.
Yeah, but if anybody's ever in this area, please stop by and see us. We'd love that. We do tours all the time. People they can't believe what we're doing here. Because it's a marriage of the tech, just high-end forensic computers and software and stuff, and everything that we do, top of the game type stuff. And then research and devise CAD stuff, everything that we do from scratch. And then we're in the middle of a 130-year-old building that's made out of wood, a giant barn, basically.
That is a cool merging of the two worlds, two eras, totally different eras. And you mentioned that you have no sales tax. You don't need a sales tax when you're collecting $14 from everybody who's driving through your state. So why make the citizens of Delaware pay taxes when you could just get it from everybody driving through? I like that. That's good.
One of the things I don't like is they'll double the road that goes to the beach. They'll double the tolls on the weekends.
Oh, That's price gouging, but that's
It
that's
is.
fine. You know, but
Yeah,
it's legal when the government does it.
apparently.
Awesome. Steve, anything else for us? I just want to let you know, my beagle's been bothering me since I sat down for this. My wife single-handedly keeps Amazon and Nordstrom Rack in business, and I also have a Chihuahua. So with Amazon packages constantly happening, I'm in a constant state of, will the Chihuahua blow up at the delivery guy? Luckily, we got through an hour and 10 minutes, and all I had was a beagle walking under me and no Chihuahua outburst. So that's a victory on my end.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, yeah, and then Kyle will be able to. I think he'd be able to get rid of any Chihuahua noises on it once we do post production on this. So, anything else for us before we close up? I know I've taken a lot of your day for you, your afternoon, but anything else to close?
Oh no, just look out for what we're going to be doing as far as
Awesome.
the new stuff that's coming out with Apple that we're going to be following suit with our software, and then of course we got a lot of new things coming out with Tolino as well. It just we're constantly innovating with new products, designs, and new things, keeping on top of technologies and trying to make it affordable for everyone.
Sure.
That was the whole reason we
Yeah.
started, is to build better systems and getting into the hands of everybody that's doing good for others. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Look, listen, a pleasure having you on. Everybody, Steve Whalen, Sumuri co-founder and IACIS lifetime member. Steve, will be seeing you minimally next year. I know I'm going to be doing a bunch of conferences next year. It's my probably my, I wouldn't call it my final year, but I'm going to try to do as many conferences as I can next year. Pleasure having you on. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll be talking to you soon. I appreciate
Yeah,
everything.
thanks for having us on. All right, take
Absolutely.
care.
All right, guys, take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.